All right, welcome to Las Vegas developers, aka Vegas programmers. So just a little thing that happened real quick. I did not put a new credit card into meetup.com, and an email went out to, I guess, everyone. I don't know, probably went into spam like it did for me, and I lost the meetups. So meetup.com, Vegas programmers is gone. And Las Vegas developers, somebody else actually hit I'll step up for organizer. So somebody from the Zappos world, Connor, shout out Connor, by the way, guy rocks. I was able to get a hold of him and we talked, and he got me back on the meetup. So long story short, I'm going to be looking into starting a Luma meetup, because that's the new meetup, it seems like. And I'm still trying to work with meetup.com support to see if I can get Vegas programmers back. Adam was the one that freaking founded Vegas, or PHP Vegas, years ago, and I can't believe I did that. So sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but that's my nature. Today we have a talk that was voluntold to Cody Moss and Robert Cox, two awesome developers, great friends. And I basically told them hey, we're doing a bunch of AI stuff. I want to hear what they do day to day with AI, right? It's interesting to hear about each developer's usage of how they use AI and what they see as pros and cons and little things like that. Sometimes you pick up, when you did your talk, Adam, you pick up on little things where it's oh, I could use this in my workflow or whatever. And this stuff's changing every day. So using LLMs and how they can assist and hurt you. I'm excited to hear this. No heckling.
No, please heckle us.
Yeah. Without further ado, Cody and Rob.
Okay. All right. So first and foremost, who are we? We should have probably sat on the opposite sides, but my name is Robert Cox. I'm a staff software engineer at Engaged MD. And if you want to find me, I'm at studiorclv.com. It's got links out to everything. This is my companion. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Cody Moss. I mean, most of you here know that, but for the internet video, I'm a senior site reliability engineer, and I work at ZeniMax, currently ZeniMax Central Services to be more exact. And you can see my fail blog down below. Every once in a while I do post up something, but it's been a couple of years.
So now, what exactly are we going to be covering today? There's a few points we're going to try and touch on, and more importantly, kind of expand on as the talk goes on. What is an LLM? What are they used for? Why would you use one? And then we're going to have a small section around the evangelist's take versus the realist's take. And I'm going to be playing the role of the realist. Cody will be playing the role of the evangelist for this conversation. So first and foremost, what is an LLM? There's some bullet points here, but Cody, do you want to kind of touch on this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So what an LLM is a large language model, which is I wish I could understand it more in depth, but from what I understand, it's it kind of guesses based off your prompt to be what it thinks the next thing should be. But it seems to be a lot more useful than that and whatnot. And it's what many people use as AI these days, though there is image models and other things out there like that, but they all kind of roughly work the same-ish way. And then it, like we point out below, it makes educated guesses based off your prompt of what it is you wanted the output to be.
To kind of break it down a little bit simpler, you could think of an LLM primarily as a token parser and token generator. It takes in a set of tokens, gives you a set of tokens out. And whether or not those things are what you want it to be, that's up to you to decide. It is a computer, but that's in its most basic form what it does.
Mm-hmm.
What are they used for? So there's a bunch of things that they kind of do. You can ask anything via chat, have them operate as agents using agentic AI methodology, and that's essentially having it act as an autonomous machine. So I'm sure you've seen things with, oh my goodness, what is the AI assistant that everyone was saying was going to take everyone's jobs?
ChatGPT.
No, not ChatGPT.
Oh.
It's the one where you paid like $800 a month and you just got a junior dev that did things for you.
Now it's It's Devin
AI, yes. That would be kind of an example of an agent. And then again, you can use it as a reference for anything. So again, these are essentially amalgamations of data and pointers that have existed inside of, at this point, due to the way AI companies have operated, essentially all of human knowledge on the internet. So more or less it has reference to pretty much anything that's been documented in some way, shape, or form digitally.
Yeah, and also if anyone is interested and wants to try out Devin, it recently got renamed to a new application called All Hands. You know, not to be confused with a bunch of meetings, but it's you can find it over off of like I believe it's one of Claude's projects. So you can look that up if you're interested.
Now, why would you use one? So I've listed a couple of ideas here, a little bit of things, and it really just comes down to interacting with computers in a more natural way, or at least that's why I tend to use them. Cody, you want to kind of expound on this a bit?
Yeah, so I also find it very interesting because it has kind of almost replaced my everyday Google searches. I mean, I still use Google from time to time, especially if I need to verify what the AI is telling me, especially if I'm getting an error message based off the code it gave me, because I'm like, well, what is this error actually telling me? Though sometimes the error message is clear enough that I can fully understand it and just solve it myself. But I mean, overall, there's a bunch of different use cases. We're going to be touching on a lot of points here in like the very last slide. And we also, towards the end, if we start running out of like conversation topics, we'll, what do you call it? We have a few demos that maybe we could show off, but also if we run out of time, just find us afterward and we can also show off the demos there too if you're interested.
So now for the meat and potatoes of this, and what I realistically think is going to be the most interesting set of talking points. There's a lot of things to kind of cover here, so you just want to run down the list? You want to read them off ahead of time, or let's just start?
Okay, I guess we'll just start going based off the top, so like applications in a non-software problem.
All right, so now let me ask you this. Applications in a non-software problem. What that realistically means is all of the generation you see around video, audio, images, use of LLMs for more, I'm going to say, mainstream uses. So like, hey, how do I make a stew or something like that? There's a lot of value there in my mind. Because to your point, it is essentially distilling Google.
Yeah, so like that is probably one of the things is like from time to time I'll like ask it, one of the things that I will ask is like, hey, give me like a 2-sentence, trying to think of like a more real-ish world problem. Like when one of my coworkers did upset me, I made a very rough message. I then sent it through ChatGPT and I asked it to make it a more professional sounding message. And that email apparently came off very well because they didn't think I was mad at all.
Yeah. And I'm going to be real, that's an application that if you haven't used it for that and you're heated about something, you should honestly look into it. Another thing, so prior to being a staff engineer, I was a manager for a number of years. It was great for reviews because, again, as someone who is managing people, you need to come off in a very non-partial, non-partisan tone, and it's great to kind of remove your voice from the text. So if you have a certain relationship with certain direct reports, as all humans do, you have biases. It's a great way to kind of filter and remove those. Even going beyond that, as you kind of delve into more generalized applications of this technology, again, I can't speak for Cody, but I make use of Brave Browser. Brave has Brave Search. Brave Search has a lot of AI tools baked into it. At this point, if I need to find out information about statistics of just random things, I'll just start talking with it. And it's really good for like looking up history facts or tidbits or finding resources about a variety of different things. It's legitimately just a better way to kind of derive and find search information. Kind of hooking into the more creative aspects of it. You know, how many of us play video games? I imagine the majority of people here do. It's seeing a lot of use with like Activision and Blizzard as they're starting to wind down staffing on the tech art side of things and wind up throughput. That's another application to where you can get a lot of fast iteration going and then have a human touch to refine these assets. Now, whether or not they're doing that and whether or not that's successful is a different question and a different matter, but that's another application of it. I've honestly, as someone who is not the most creative person in the world, as most programmers aren't, using it to kind of riff and get a baseline of something as far as visual design language goes to then take and refine and make my own has also been very useful.
Yeah, I've also like dabbled in it. Like, what do you call it? Like, one of the other uses I found is like when I was playing around with Stable Diffusion and other image things like that is, you know, it's pretty cool that you could just kind of like add a bunch of images and then be like, turn me into a Muppet. And then that's been my Slack profile icon for a little while now. But from time to time, you know, you can also shift it up. It's really great if you aren't really artsy, if you're more technological, because then you can like get some really neat things with just a English prompt. Also, going back on the review thing, if you have to do self-reviews, I have found it to be very successful in if you have like a bullet point list that you kind of want to get across to your manager and be like, these are all the things I did this year. It can help you distill like that bullet point list into something that sounds like a very professional, like, you know, a few paragraphs as well. I've had good success with that. Though, still make sure you read through it, because I did notice it started repeating itself a lot.
Hallucinations.
Yes.
So now, something that's actually going to drive up a little bit of difference here, I think. Applications as they pertain to technology. So we have a number of bullet points sub to this one. So again, web software applications, infrastructure, software not for the web, usage in creative technology fields, and testing software with LLMs. I think we just go down the bullets.
Yeah, sure.
So building software applications, Cody, what do you realistically find useful in regards to building software day to day using LLM technology and AI technology?
So one of the recent projects that I've been working on for my wife is she wanted to have a Discord bot that would look for a code inside of a message. And that was probably one of the things where it's like I kept diving down in languages that I knew very adamantly and very thoroughly, but I kept noticing that a lot of the SDKs were either very rough or very early days. But then I found one called PyCord, and I was like, I'm terrible at Python, but with the assistance of AI, I fumbled my way enough through it that I was actually able to get the application up and running, where it did most of the bootstrapping for me. I just had to fill in the logic that I cared about. That's the other part that I think is really neat about AI, is the fact is that it is good at doing repetitive tasks, right? Like things that it has seen before again and again and again, and it goes, oh, you just want me to do this again. So it's really good at that, where I could just be like, hey, I need a Python file that's using this library that just has like an event and also like a / command. And it went and it made all the bootstrapping, and then I just filled in the functions for the parts that I cared about. Where I also then went back to also chat with it on various things, like how do I make a web request in Python?
So I want to call some things out there. It sounds like you got an application, does most of what you want. How complicated is it?
Currently right now, I would say it's actually fairly simple, considering the fact is it only has like 2 / commands and it listens on 2 events that happen within Discord. But overall, I would say, yeah, fairly simple.
It's like give or take 100 lines of Python?
Less than that. I want to say it's like 50.
Okay, 50 lines of Python. So I've had good luck using it for small things like that. I had to write a bash script the other day. I knew how to do it. I was too lazy to type it. I asked 5.4, hey, give me a bash script. It's going to reach out to this address. It's going to try 3 times. And if it doesn't, it's going to execute this command if it can't connect. The only reason I was comfortable doing that was because I actually knew and could write it myself. I don't think it's a solid thing to have these LLMs bootstrap projects for you when you don't fully understand what it's doing. When you don't fully understand the machinations of like the tools it's bringing in, because like you ultimately have to support it. And this is a small project, it's 50 lines. My bash script was like 50 lines. So like they're small scoped things that LLM can fully take in the entire thing as context and know to work with inside of these boundaries. What happens when the project becomes 2,000 lines, 4,000 lines, 10,000 lines?
Really depends on the model.
Depends on the model, okay. So,
because I know at work with like GitHub Copilot and it having access to like our various repos and things like that, that it's very helpful, because like I've noticed that it also will like do the tab auto completions, where it'd be like, oh hey, like I see you're doing this here, but like, you know, somewhere else in your org you were doing this. And I was like, oh yeah, tab complete. Instead of me writing it myself, let me just repeat this pattern we already have.
Okay.
And like that's something that I know inside of our repos we have probably at this point tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lines.
Alrighty. So I guess my question to you is, how do you know it's actually a pattern that's in the apps?
Experience, because I've been working there a while before AI was a huge thing.
Okay. So now if you are a junior and you're coming into this code base and you've only ever used AI and you only know AI and you only know the AI way of doing things, do you think it's safe to develop that blind trust to it? Because again, you've got 13, 14, 15 years of experience in this. For someone who does not have that, do you think that's a healthy way to build software to help them grow?
As long as you have a good peer review system, yes.
Okay.
If you have a bunch of people that rubber stamp it, no, probably not.
Have you ever worked in a company with a good peer review system on pull requests?
A few times.
Okay. All right, then, hey, fair. I can't argue with that. What I will say, and this is very recent experience, I've seen a lot of more junior engineers, they'll whip something up with an LLM, they'll yeet it into a pull request, and they won't even test it. And I'm seeing that more and more frequently, and I feel like part of that is the ease of just producing code that these tools provide. Not to say that they're not useful, but it almost feels as if it's a detriment to the long-term sustainability of software development as a practice, because you're going to eventually have, let's be real, we're going to get old, we're going to age out, and then we're going to have a generation of people who have only ever worked with LLMs. At what point does that become problematic?
I don't know, because it's also like if you're just yeeting code into production, eventually it's going to fail and you're going to have to learn the hard way. I mean, I hate to say, when production burns, but some of like the best life lessons I've ever had is like when I just kind of threw code out and then production broke.
Okay, fair.
Because, at that point it's sink or swim.
I guess organizationally, are there any guardrails as an institution we should be putting in place to kind of protect these people from themselves? Or do you think unfettered access to these tools is the right way to build web software?
I would say if you're early in your software career, maybe go more towards like the chatting and talking side of it versus like the code generation side of it, because it does work as like a good, utility to kind of like help you do research. It's basically Stack Overflow as a chatbot. So it's like, a lot of people, as you start out as a junior engineer, you're Googling, and chances are great you come across Stack Overflow, person has like the solution, you copy and paste it, and then you get told by the senior engineer, but what does it do? Right? And then like they kind of get you to go and do like that same kind of research. Where it's like this could be like where it's, it's already going out, it's finding that same information without you having to like leave your terminal. So you get a lot more done more quickly. But then at the end of the day, I would still hope you then had like a senior engineer that goes, okay, but what does it do?
Okay. So, totally fair. Mm-hmm. What do we do for people who are in one-man shops? And what I mean by that is our first few jobs in our careers, we're the only developer. There was no senior. There was no one to tell you you were shooting yourself in the foot. You just shot yourself in the foot and then you hoped you didn't catch sepsis.
I mean, there isn't always a perfect scenario.
That's fair.
But I also feel like, again, it would still make you productive enough to kind of be able to get like the idea out there, the MVP out there. Now, will it be perfect? Probably not. I mean, this is where code iteration comes in. It's like AI shouldn't replace the developer. It's there to assist the developer.
Okay.
Right? It's basically having like a code assistant with you at all times. It's, for lack of better term, it's basically IntelliSense on steroids.
Yeah. So I have peppered you with a ton of questions. Mm-hmm. Your turn.
I don't know. The problem is we're also touching on all the same points. So I guess like, how would you see like a lot of like the junior engineers and stuff like using AI?
So from my perspective, it almost feels like we need, like I said, guardrails. It's like you need to understand fundamentals before you can begin to use a tool to augment the fundamentals. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't throw someone in JV football out with players in the NFL and then watch them get creamed. I think it's fair to say giving someone the rock in that instance is probably not the best thing. And again, it's a pattern I'm seeing to where we give these junior engineers larger and larger tasks, which in my mind is a failure on the organization, because why are you setting people up to just face plant? But more importantly, these tools are letting them mostly get there, and it's good enough to where the product people don't see a problem. And it's really a business issue from my perspective, in that you're facilitating these people who don't necessarily have the deepest understanding of these things to make them productive in a business setting, which is now producing software that may or may not be up to the task. Now, does that necessarily matter in video games? Probably not from a critical systems perspective. Does it matter in medical software? Depending upon the medical software, potentially. NASA rockets, that's someone's life. Mm-hmm. So I guess the question is, like, at what point do we begin to kind of take a step back and organizationally look at these things? From my mind, you kind of go up in criticality of industry as you develop as a software engineer. Like, the stuff I'm doing now compared to the stuff I started doing is night and day in regards to criticality. I'd argue my job is still not like mission critical, but it does impact people in a very important way. Mm-hmm. And I think you could say the same thing. If someone were to come in at this level of criticality and not have these guardrails in place, there's a much higher chance for impact. And I don't know that the productivity gains of giving these tools out to everybody outweighs the risk.
It really depends. Like, at the end of the day, it's, it's going to really come down to, do you trust the code?
Yeah. And I argue it becomes harder to trust the code when you don't write it.
What do you propose as a solution for the case of giving a junior dev AI? Are you saying don't give them AI and see how they do and make sure they understand? Or like, what, in your case, is it a company culture issue, or is it a case-by-case thing with junior devs and not giving them enough room to hang themselves with or something like that?
It's a bit of both, right? So ultimately, liability lies with the people who own the software. And I think in most places that's the company. And there is a company culture there of like prioritizing fast iteration and just delivering the feature over delivering it the right way. I think, and it's really hard because there's not like a true bar for this profession, but like putting rails in place to where like use AI to learn about these things. Don't use it to generate the code that does the thing you're learning about. So like if you're working with, say, 5.4 and a chatbot, if you're asking it for explanations of like the Loon algorithm, hey, in plain English, tell me what the Loon algorithm does. Not, hey, write this for me in JavaScript. That's where I think the differences begin to break down realistically, because one of these is getting them to understand the problem space. The other is giving them a solution. They should still be forced to come up with the solution. And then, you're doing this for 10 years and you've written the Loon algorithm a million times, like, yeah, you don't need to write it again. Maybe take some of those guardrails off because there's an expectation of understanding. But if you're not setting people up to understand the things they're doing, I think that's unfair to everybody.
What about those of us that have never written a balloon algorithm?
Well, then you should understand what it means before you do it. And again, as someone with as much experience, you would trust that person to understand that as a need.
If y'all can't tell, I've never written a balloon algorithm in my life.
The Loon algorithm, Luhn, if you're interested, it's just a credit card validation algorithm. I'm positive you're like 10 times more familiar with it than I am.
Nope.
Oh, okay, cool. But it's just a simple hashing algorithm for credit card numbers. If they hash a certain way, oh, cool. It's valid. If it doesn't, it's not.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But yeah.
I had to do that. I had to write one, yes.
Yeah. That's my take on web software, I guess.
Yeah. Though I'm going to jump around here a bit because I'm going to go to the testing, because I will say I found LLMs are a godsend when you're taking over a project that has 0 tests. Now, I'm not saying that the tests it writes are going to be exact, because it's going to go and based off the code that's there. And then from there, you have to work backwards with the product to then be like, is this test valid? Is that test valid? But it was a great starting point to just be like, inherit project. Hey, GitHub Copilot, I need you to write tests for all of these methods. And it kind of went and did it. And then when I ran the tests, they passed. And then I go, but are these valid?
Okay. So then you acknowledge that going down the route of implementing and then deriving tests from that implementation is prone to hallucination then?
Well, it's not so much prone to hallucination. The fact is, it's like you're giving it something to read. So it's going to read the code and it's going to write the test to make sure that that passes. Now, was that code from the start bug free?
Yeah. Well, and again, this is my experience. I found that it knows what is in the function. It doesn't know why or how the function is used necessarily. Mm-hmm. So it'll test for something that may not be a use case. And it's like, well, this test isn't worth anything. We're not using it in that way.
Yeah, but I've also had it where it thought of another case that I never even dreamed of, and it was a valid case. So hallucinations could go both ways.
That's true. That's true. I guess from my perspective, I kind of trust. Again, I'm thinking of this from like the product person's perspective. They know what they want this thing to do. You should conform to that spec. And then from there, have the code implement that spec. And that may be naive and wrong. I very much that's my interpretation of it, but it feels to me like basically writing something you think is going to do the thing you want it to do and then generating tests based on what your thought was isn't an exact way to kind of get reliable testing.
Yeah, I guess if you're going a test-driven development style, it would make more sense to write the test first and then have the LLM go based off of that. But I will say that I'm terrible in that sense because I always think of the feature first, and then usually I'm the guy who pushes his PR up, and then the another senior engineer on my team will go, "Where's the test?" And I go, "Right, I'll be right back." So it's also helpful in that case because I could usually just write it because I test it by hand, and then when it works the way I want it to, I could just be like, "Hey, now enshrine this in a test. Thank you."
Okay.
So it's kind of like a lackey in that sense.
That's fair. And that does beg a question: what is the right methodology for writing software? For me, like it honestly depends on what it is I'm doing. If it's a simple, hey, add this tick box, I'm probably not going to write a test for the tick box. If it's build this system, then I'm designing my API, I'm building tests against that API, and then watching them go green. So it is a different way of kind of doing that. And you bring up an interesting point, one I hadn't considered around it thinking of cases you didn't. That's actually a very useful thing. Even if it is hallucination, like the fact that it's approaching it from a different angle is nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other topic you want to touch on?
So I do want to touch on infrastructure for the web. And by the way, we've kind of broken out web and non-web for various reasons, but infrastructure for the web, and you're going to hate this because you're an SRE.
By the way, he wrote the slides.
Yeah. But infrastructure for the web feels more like config crunching than it does software development. Mm-hmm. First and foremost, that's a hot take, I'm sure. Do you agree or disagree?
Say it again. I might have missed something.
If I'm writing Terraform or if I'm writing CloudFormation, that's configuration crunching. That's not me writing an app.
Yeah. I could definitely. Some people will argue that it's infrastructure as code, but I'm also like, at the end of the day, you're configuring a cloud.
I mean, HCL literally has config in the name.
Yeah.
That's
though now you have like the Terraform CDK cloud development kit. So technically you don't even need to use HCL to use Terraform. You can use a variety of languages.
Interesting.
Though because of that, I have had AI, not GitHub Copilot, usually my local AI that I run on mine that are much smaller models. I've had it hallucinate and then try to do CDK in the middle of my Terraform. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work.
So this speaks to my ignorance. I've had really easy times doing this because it's primarily writing up configs to have Terraform provision something. You're doing real infrastructure in your daily job, and you're like, it's hallucinating all the time. Maybe it's not as useful as I thought it was for this.
Well, no, that was like my personal project because I'm cheap, so I like to run the LLMs off my MacBook here, like locally. Mostly because I'm not paying per token. I'm definitely paying in electricity though. It'll drain the shit out of your battery. But because it's a much smaller model, it has like a lot less data to work with. It's usually only my one code base that it's looking at. And then it's like, so if you have CDK stuff mixed in with your Terraform stuff, it may start to go like, well, he was using this here. And it's like, well, yeah, that was a JavaScript file. This is a Terraform HCL file. Two different files. But smaller model got confused. But GitHub Copilot, I haven't had it where it confuses like that. It usually, I don't know how big GitHub Copilot is. I just know that typically its autocomplete is a lot more
Robust.
Yes, a lot more robust, but it's also usually a lot more accurate to what it is I'm actually looking for.
Okay.
Or even like the chat functionality will be very much a lot more what I'm looking for versus my personal small model.
That's fair. I guess from my perspective, I feel a little more comfortable having it write cloud configs because you're going to run the cloud config and it made the EC2 or it didn't. There's not really like a broken state of that. It's either, oh, cool, I can connect to this or I cannot. Go from there until it works. And maybe, again, that's naivety on my part.
Just make sure it doesn't put count 1,000. Your cloud bill would be astronomical that month.
T2 micros on the free tier, bro. It's all good.
To a certain count.
Yeah. But
infrastructure-wise, you are right. It does tend to get a lot more clear of answer because it is a bit of a, like I can't say it's a simple ask, it's a simpler ask. Where it's, it's usually is a block for the resource and it just kind of says, this is going to be an EC2 and it's going to be within this subnet with this, security groups and stuff like that. Like that's just kind of, it's a much simpler ask than me being like, go write the Fibonacci sequence.
Make me Postgres, but my own.
Though if anyone ever does get AI to generate Postgres, let me know how successful it went.
For sure. I mean, that's kind of been my take on it personally. I don't have much more to dive in on the infrastructure side of things, mainly because I was hoping you would push back on me, but you, true to your name, you've bought in.
Yeah, it's working.
Yeah.
It works.
That's fair.
So even though you know that it works, how do you know that it's secure?
That's why you have a security team.
Well, sure, but like at the same time, you want to go ahead and create an instance and things like that. And sure, you may have security groups and NSG and lock it down, but it may automatically hook up an API for it, and you may not catch that, or it may have local by default, something like those things.
So this is like something else that I've kind of come across where, because like you did ask like the right question. How do I know it's secure? And sadly, the answer is
you don't.
You really don't. But I have also seen like when you're talking with it, if you do actually give it the word secure, at least in my experience, I haven't had it go and be like, oh, you should leave off the security groups. You should leave off the cloud, the firewall. You should leave all this stuff out. Just spin up your EC2 and let it connect straight to the internet. I've always seen it kind of like go and generate the VPC and all that other stuff. And there was even a time where I've had, younger engineers like come and ask me, is this actually secure? And I was kind of shocked to find out that, yeah, it was relatively secure. Now, I'm not going to say go blindly trust it because it is still security. And at the end of the day, if you get hacked, it could make you liable, right? So do your research.
But I think that goes back into my original point of you need to understand before you actually do.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, though, for the question. I appreciate it.
So now I got to ask the question, what's the difference between web software applications and software not for the web?
Software not for the web.
There's a thing?
Video games, desktop apps. Phone. It's a whole ecosystem. It's probably at least 5% of the jobs we care about.
My Tesla does connect to the internet.
No, but I mean, in this particular case, the thing I kind of wanted to touch on was game development. I've been doing it a fair amount on the side. For me, as someone who has a background in software engineering and not a background in game development, but understands software architecture, it's been an absolute godsend. It's taken me from basically very minimal understanding to applying concepts in weeks versus probably months of research. And I guess that's kind of where, I'm interested to get your perspective on this. For me, it was extremely valuable there. Now, do I also double check it? Yes. Do I also rewrite probably 80% of what it gives me? Also yes. But it's a base, it's a foundation. And it's useful for that, I guess, is what I would say. This should really be building software not for your main wheelhouse is what this should say, but.
Yeah. I mean, I was mostly kidding before. It's like something else I've kind of discovered is I really hate UIs. I really do. Like they're the most terrible thing you could ever attempt to write. Though I'm sure I just insulted a bunch of front-end engineers, and I apologize. I'm definitely someone who's more on the back end. But I will say, on a personal project level, AI has kind of been great at that, where I'm like, hey, give me a React Native UI that has like a button and like a text prompt and all this other stuff, right? And it'll just go and it'll generate it. Now, is it perfect every time? No. But does it get me enough to where I can copy and paste my way to success? Yes.
I gotta say I've had a very similar experience. So like I use a game engine called Love2D. It's Lua based. It's mainly 2D. It's in the name. Going from a black screen to, I've built Pong with score counters and paddles that actually function, and there's variable spin on the ball as you hit it with physics. Like that was very engrossing and exciting and fun to build. I would not have been able to build that successfully on my own without the ability to chat with something to understand what these concepts were and how they were applied. So.
Also, AI is the best rubber ducky.
Absolutely.
Because I can't say there was a day, I guess my brain was already toasted for the day. It was like right there at the end, and I was just so done with it. I got a Terraform error. I will admit, I did not even read it. I kind of just took it, sent it right to GitHub Copilot, and it went, let me fix that for you. And it put brackets. That's literally all I was missing, was just a pair of brackets and a 0. Because I had missed in Terraform that I had turned something into a count to make it optional, so I needed the first entry of it if it was enabled. And AI was like, I get what you're trying to do. Here's how you solve it. Do you want to accept this? Like, that's the other thing too. Is almost all of these, like in your IDE, it'll generate code into it, but it doesn't just save it. It doesn't just put it there. It goes, hey, here's the code. Do you want me to save this? And you could sit there and go block by block and be like, yeah, I accept this, I accept that. In this case, I had one block, and it was just, when I saw it, I was like, oh, thank God, GitHub Copilot.
Cool. I mean, I don't have much more to add to that one. We have the final one, which is very spicy, so that one's going to be fun.
I have no comment on this, really. I mean, I do have like a few comments, but it really comes down to like, it is repeating, right? Because it repeats what it sees, and a lot of these AI companies just kind of went out and scraped the internet for everything that it had. And now there's kind of rules in place, like they'll follow your robots.txt and other various things like that, so they won't scan certain things.
We've already taken everything. We won't come back, don't worry.
Yeah. But there was like also, some downsides to this, like, AI was scraping Reddit so much that they were like, okay, never mind, we're locking all this down. You have to pay us for API access, period, sorry. And they didn't say that was due to AI, but I was like, it's a little coincidental that it's actually also at the same time that OpenAI was basically hammering Reddit for all of its information. So I'm like, 1 + 2 = fish.
I think the things I find to be more interesting, and really it's this relating to this. This is going to lead to some very interesting legal precedents being set and some very interesting restrictions being placed on the software. So to kind of cover usage in creator technology fields, it's used in a lot of things now. We talked earlier on about video games and Activision and Blizzard's use of it. We're seeing it now more and more in movies and videography and things like that. Let's kind of dive into the use of copywritten works. More or less, these companies kind of scraped the internet for everything, and they're now using it to make these models that they're selling to everybody, and they're generating content from, and they're generating very distinctly similar styles of very copywritten works from this. That's led to a lot of current lawsuits, and there's going to be a lot of impact from those lawsuits. This also has impact on the software side of things.
Yeah, but I would also argue that without that kind of scraping, because like these AI models, right, they take a boatload of data, right? We're talking huge swaths of data in order to train them up to get them to where they are now. And so I guess I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate. Like I do, like the lawsuits were gonna come, but it was definitely one of those things that's like you probably had to look at it more as like a cost of doing business. Because you were never going to get the AIs to where they are now without massively scraping the internet.
So now let's talk about licensing and all of that. Let's take software first. Let's use software first. Do you think AGPL code was scraped?
Yes.
Does that not make everything generated by an LLM derivatives of that code? And does that not mean that you need to provide source code using the AGPL derivative code?
Prove that it actually copied the code.
I think there's a
Well, I mean, if we're going to go that route, you also then have to look at like developers, right? Because I know there's a lot of times where I've gone to repos, like especially in my junior years and mid-level years, I spent a lot of time on GitHub where I was just reading other people's code, right? It's one of the best ways to learn. So is any of the code that I've written, because I've seen that pattern before, I've seen all this stuff before, is me writing that code? Am I a derivative of AGPL?
I think there's a different semantic meaning to a human being looking at something and deriving influence from it, and having a machine internalize the tokens and then use it as part of an output processor.
But I've also actually seen it where like it's changing the code, right? It's not like, yes, back in the early days we did see where GitHub Copilot was just like, yeah, here's this entire file that I've seen before, and it's like, well, they even had the AGPL comment in it. Like, yes, that's pretty bad. But now I've also seen where it's like, it's kind of going through and yeah, it will copy patterns, but it will replace it with your own variable names and things like that. So it's kind of still doing like what you would call, I guess, inspiration or inspired by. Okay.
So then if we look at these lawsuits, which there's a very high chance Disney and, oh my goodness, who's the other one?
Well, Disney is suing, what do you call it? Mostly I forget which company it was, but they mostly do image model. Right? Yeah, that is right, or at least it sounds right. But they deal with mostly image generation, which is like, that's where like I feel like this, because artists can also still get in trouble if they copy a piece of art basically verbatim or are close enough.
Well, if you trace it, yes, but if it's a novel design in a style, no.
The lawsuits are because it was not going with the actual proper use of the product. They were not allowed to use it in the manner that they use it.
I see.
That's the problem. If it's on GitHub and it's copyright, if you're using it as inspiration, you don't have to put their stuff in it. but because you're allowed to view it, it's on GitHub and you're allowed to view, well, if you're following their terms of service, right? And for OpenAI, Microsoft probably wasn't going to sue them, so they were probably okay, right? But that's the whole thing, it's the terms of service. Was it part of the terms of service that you were allowed to gather the information that you gathered? That's what the lawsuits are about, because you did not follow the terms of service that you agreed to by viewing the website.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. That changes things dramatically. That makes this much more interesting. Okay.
Right, because it's like, well, now it's basically going to be, did Midjourney scrape the information the right way? Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, if anyone, I mean, a lot of people here have probably written of, something that they thought was going to automate something in their life and were excited for it, and then when they ran it, and it deleted something it shouldn't have, right? Or it did something it shouldn't have, or it scanned more than it shouldn't have. Anytime you write software that way, chances are great it's going to accidentally do something once, and you're going to have to fix it. In this case, it's companies are fighting over that.
I guess from the perspective of licensing in terms of service, does that change how people store their code moving forward then?
Oh yeah, you've already kind of seen that when GitHub Copilot came out. There was, I won't say it was a mass exodus because it wasn't even enough to get news publicity, but I know out of my friend group, a lot of them started hosting their own Git servers and they pulled all their code off GitHub because they were like, I didn't okay that, and it's that's an honest reaction. Now, should GitHub have, preemptively gone, hey, we're scanning your code? Maybe, but then again, they also kind of said that in the terms of service, like, hey, all your code that's up here is accessible. I mean, that's kind of why you use GitHub, right? Because it makes your code accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
Versus me having to then go find your website that links me to a Git server that may not have the most friendly of UIs, and I have to know how to use Git in order to clone your code. It makes it not as open, right? Because like GitHub, I know I've said it myself where it's like somebody was like, where do I start? And it's like, go make a GitHub account. That's where you start. Go make a repo, and then just start typing code into it.
Well, typing code into an editor and pushing that code.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the pushing's the hard part.
Yeah. I guess that is an interesting take, though. So, I guess what would be the impact of that then?
Probably nothing code-wise.
So nothing in our field. Probably more of an impact on the
yeah, because I mean,
licensable media. Is that the right phrase?
Yeah, because if you have Midjourney sitting there generating Mickey Mouse, that could be bad.
Legal.
Huh?
Mickey Mouse is open.
Tugboat Willie is open.
Yeah, Tugboat Willie's
Yeah,
open.
it's not Mickey, it's Tugboat Willie. It's obvious. It's obvious.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that he's a mouse and he's dressed the same. It's Tugboat Willie.
So watch out for colors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just don't add colors. It'll be fine. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the lawsuits say. But again, this is kind of the downside of AI is it's a bunch of big players. It's kind of rare to see a small company be like, we're an AI company. And it's like, you're an AI company who's using a big company AI. I don't think I've ever seen a small company go, we have an AI model that can go and do this thing for you. So I guess like lawsuits are just going to be part of that because of the fact is it's just big players, right? And anytime you have a bunch of big players playing in the same room, they're all going to start shouting foul and trying to get money out of each other.
The way I look at it, if you think back, 3 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
There's two models, right? There's the Uber model, there's the Lyft model. Uber says, we're going to go here even though it's not legal for us to go here until you kick us out and start suing us. Lyft says, well, we'll wait for Uber to get the laws written and then we'll go there. Right? So in AI, right, there are open data sets. right? So today you can go on a Hugging Face and you can download very reputable, very open, very free, very properly licensed data sets to build things. So you don't have to go scrape everything. There are data sets that are useful, but what they are not is current. Right? So you can train a model to do things. What you can't do is have it tell you what happened yesterday, unless it can go out to the internet. Or like if there's a new pattern of doing something, it doesn't know about it. Right?
This brings a question into agentic AI, because you have like all these agents that are coming up and they're all using that protocol
MCP.
Yeah, MCP, so that they can like go out and to servers that then would go and fetch and scrape data for them. Is that against anyone's terms of service?
So I worked at William Hill for a while, and we had a system that was regulated. The regulated part of that system was an index.php file with 100 imports. None of the other files it required were regulated.
So, hashtag it depends.
Well, I could see a situation to where these MCP protocols are kind of implementing server-side applications that these models leverage, but it's not technically part of the model, so therefore it's a server app doing something, not the model doing it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I could see the legal argument being made, kind of like how we regulated a require-only PHP file.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, we've talked a ton. I think the next one is going to be questions, right?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so I think we already have been on this stage, but Rob, is there anything you would like to close on?
If I can give you one piece of advice, learn the things before you use a tool to do it for you. That's all I care about.
I say use the AI to learn the thing.
That's fair.
Okay, well, we have a couple minutes to keep the conversation going, but we're gonna end the YouTube. Thanks for everybody who's watching on YouTube. And if you're in Vegas, come check us out. Third Tuesday of every month at Corporate Coworking. Thanks to Corporate Coworking for hooking us up with the space. Tony here is awesome. If you ever need a co-working space, this is the place. Great location to work out of, especially during the summer when your kids are trying to bust into your office.